In a quiet town, a 10-year-old boy named Jack overheard a conversation that would change everything. Some of his classmates were going hungry, unable to pay for school lunches. Jack made a decision that shocked everyone. He would save every penny he could and pay off their lunch debts. But with just a jar of coins and a heart full of determination, could one small act of kindness truly make a difference? The moment Jack stepped into the principal's office, his world, and the lives of countless others would never be the same. This is the incredible story of how one boy's simple gesture sparked a movement that would change his school forever. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. In the small town of Maplewood, where the streets were lined with tall, proud maple trees and the pace of life was slower than most places, a 10-year-old boy named Jack Carter decided to make a change. Jack was not like other kids in his class. While most of his friends spent their allowance on candy, video games, or new toys, Jack had a different idea in mind. His heart, even at such a young age, was full of kindness, and he had a deep desire to make a difference in the world. It all began one afternoon when Jack was walking home from school. As he passed the teacher's lounge, he overheard a conversation that would change his life forever. Two teachers, Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Henderson, were talking quietly but seriously. They were concerned about some of the students who were struggling to pay for their school lunches. Some kids had to eat nothing more than plain bread and milk, while others were forced to skip lunch altogether. The teachers talked about how difficult it was to see children go hungry, but they didn't know what they could do to help. Jack stood in the hallway, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had just heard. He could hardly believe it. How could kids go hungry at school? How could anyone, especially children, have to sit in class all day without food? He thought about his own childhood, remembering the days when his family struggled to make ends meet. There had been times when his parents didn't have enough money to buy groceries, and Jack knew the feeling of an empty stomach all too well, but never had he thought that some of his friends at school might be going through the same thing. That night, as Jack lay in bed, the conversation he had overheard kept replaying in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of his classmates sitting in the lunchroom with empty plates, or worse, no lunch at all. He knew he had to do something, but he wasn't sure what. What could a 10-year-old like him possibly do to help? The answer came to him the next day while he was eating breakfast. Jack's mother, Mrs. Carter, had just placed a bowl of cereal in front of him when he said, "Mom, I'm going to save up all my allowance money this year, and when I have enough, I'm going to pay for the kids' lunches who can't afford them." At first, his mother thought he was joking, but Jack's face was serious and she could see the determination in his eyes. "How are you going to do that?" she asked gently. "I don't know yet, but I'll find a way," Jack replied. "I'll save every penny I can. It's not right that some kids don't get lunch, and I want to help. I want to make sure no one at school has to go hungry." Jack's mother was speechless. She had always known her son was a kind-hearted boy, but she never imagined he would come up with such a big idea on his own. She smiled at him and nodded. "Well, I think that's a wonderful idea, Jack. Just remember, it might take some time, but if you're determined, I'm sure you'll make it happen." From that moment on, Jack's mission became clear. Every coin he earned, every bit of pocket money he received from his parents or relatives, would go into his special savings jar. He found an old glass jar in the kitchen cupboard and wrote a label on it in big, bold letters. "For my friends." Jack knew that the money in that jar wasn't just for toys or video games. It was for something far more important. The first few weeks were easy. Jack would take his spare change and carefully drop it into the jar, the sound of the coins clinking, together giving him a sense of satisfaction. He was doing something good, and each coin represented another step closer to reaching his goal. But as time passed, it started to get harder. Jack's friends were spending their allowances on new toys, snacks, and video games. Jack, on the other hand, watched as his jar filled up, but not nearly as quickly as he had hoped. Sometimes when his friends would offer him a snack or ask if he wanted to play a video game, Jack would have to say no. He didn't want to give in to the temptation. He knew that if he was going to help his friends, he had to stay focused. As the months went by, Jack's jar grew fuller, but so did his determination. His family noticed that Jack had become more disciplined. He would often turn down treats or small purchases, choosing instead to add whatever he could to the jar. His mother was proud of him, and even his little sister Lily began to understand what he was doing. "Jack, why don't you buy a new toy?" Lily asked one day, looking at him with wide, curious eyes. Jack smiled at her and replied, "Because the kids at school need the money more than I do, Lily. I want to help them." His simple answer made Lily think, and she nodded quietly. Jack's mission was bigger than just saving money. It was about making a real difference in the lives of others, and he wasn't going to stop until he had done just that. By the time the school year was almost over, Jack had saved a total of $237.65. It wasn't a fortune by any means, but to Jack it was everything. Every penny, every nickel, every dime had been earned with sacrifice and love. With trembling hands he counted the money once more, his heart swelling with pride. He had done it. He had saved enough to help his friends. Now, all he had to do was take the final step. As the weeks passed, Jack's small act of saving pennies and coins grew into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. With every dollar added to the jar, Jack felt closer to his goal, but he also realized that the journey would not be as easy as he had hoped. The weight of his mission was beginning to show, but he never gave up. Jack knew that even though it seemed like a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, it was a gesture that could change lives, and that to him was worth every sacrifice. Jack's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, had always taught him the value of hard work. They had never been wealthy, and Jack understood that money didn't come easily. His mother often worked long hours as a nurse, while his father spent his days working as a mechanic. They had always managed to make ends meet, but there were times when Jack saw his parents struggle. They never complained, though. They simply carried on and did what they could to provide for the family. Jack admired them both deeply and wanted to show them that he too could make a difference. He wanted to prove that he understood the importance of hard work, even if it meant sacrificing a few things that other children might take for granted. His small hands worked tirelessly, collecting every spare coin, every bit of pocket change he could find. He began doing extra chores around the house, offering to mow the lawn or wash the dishes just to earn a few extra pennies. It wasn't easy, but Jack was determined. While his friends were out playing games, laughing, and enjoying the little things that life had to offer, Jack kept his focus. He would look at his jar, and the sight of it gave him strength. With every coin he added, Jack thought of the children at his school who went without lunch, and his resolve grew stronger. Christmas came, and Jack received gifts from his family. But unlike his friends, who tore open their presents with excitement, Jack carefully placed his gifts to the side. He didn't need new toys or games. The only thing that mattered to him now was filling his jar. His family couldn't understand why he wasn't excited about the gifts. But Jack knew that if he wanted to help, he had to stay focused. "Don't you want to play with your new game?" his sister Lily asked one evening. "It's the latest one." Jack smiled at her and shook his head. "I'm okay, Lily. There are kids at school who don't get to eat lunch. I want to help them." His parents exchanged a quiet glance, amazed by the maturity Jack was showing at such a young age. They could see that this wasn't just a passing fancy for him. This was something important to Jack, something that had taken root in his heart and wasn't going to be shaken off easily. As Jack walked home from school each day, he would often pass by the lunchroom, where he saw his friends eating lunch. Some were laughing, some were talking about their favorite cartoons, and others were simply enjoying the break from schoolwork. But Jack noticed that there were always a few kids sitting quietly, barely touching their food or staring at their trays as if they didn't even want to be there. It hurt Jack to see them like this. He thought about what it would be like to sit there, hungry, and not have the energy to focus on anything other than the emptiness in his stomach. He knew the feeling all too well. The memories of those tough times with his family, when there was never enough money to go around, came flooding back. But Jack had made a promise to himself. No child at his school should ever have to go through that again, not if he could help it. The months rolled on, and Jack's jar slowly filled. He watched it grow, but there were times when he wondered if it would be enough. Would $237.65 really be enough to help the kids at school? Would it make a difference? At moments of doubt, Jack's mind would wander to the teacher's conversation he had overheard months ago. They had talked about how there were so many kids who went without lunch, and Jack was determined to change that. The money in his jar might not seem like much to some people, but to Jack, it was the key to solving a problem that had weighed heavily on his heart. One day, as the school year was drawing to a close, Jack had a breakthrough. He had been walking home from school, his mind busy with thoughts of the jar and the kids who still hadn't received the help they needed. As he passed by the corner store, something caught his eye. There, in the window, was a sign that read, "Donations needed for school lunch program." It was a simple sign, but for Jack, it felt like a sign from the universe. This was his moment. Jack knew what he had to do. He ran home, grabbed his jar, and with excitement in his heart counted the money. The amount wasn't huge, but it was enough to make a difference. $237.65. He took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment when everything would change. He had worked so hard, and now it was time to do what he had set out to do all along. With the jar in his hands, Jack made his way to the school's office, his heart pounding in his chest. He was nervous, unsure of how the principal, Mr. Thompson, would react. Would he understand what Jack was trying to do? Would he think it was silly? Or would he see the true meaning behind the jar of coins? When Jack walked into the principal's office, he was greeted by a warm smile. "Jack, what brings you here today?" Mr. Thompson asked. Jack took a deep breath, and with a voice full of determination, he said, "I want to pay off the lunch debts for the kids who can't afford to eat. I've saved up all my allowance money, and I want to help." Mr. Thompson looked down at the jar, then back at Jack. There was silence for a moment, and Jack's heart raced. Finally, the principal smiled and said, "Jack, this is one of the most thoughtful things I've ever heard. Let's see what we can do." And just like that, Jack's journey of saving and sacrifice was about to change everything for his school and his friends. But little did Jack know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger story. Jack couldn't believe what was happening. His heart was pounding in his chest as he stood in Mr. Thompson's office, holding the jar filled with $237.65. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but to Jack, it was everything. This money, all earned through sacrifice and determination, had the power to change lives. He had no idea how big an impact this small gesture would have. He only knew one thing. He was doing something that felt right, something that could help the kids who needed it the most. Mr. Thompson looked at the jar, then at Jack, his eyes softening with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Jack," he said after a long pause, "this is incredibly generous of you. You've worked so hard for this, and your kindness is truly inspiring. But this money will go a long way. Let me take it to the lunch program coordinator, and we'll make sure it goes to the right place." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of pride and relief wash over him. He had done it. His hard work had paid off. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a warmth spread across his chest. But what Jack didn't know was that this small act of kindness would soon grow into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. The next day, Jack was sitting in his classroom, trying to focus on the lesson. He kept glancing at the clock, eager for the school day to end so he could check back in with Mr. Thompson. He had no idea what was going to happen next, but his heart was racing with anticipation. Little did he know, by the end of the day, his simple gesture would have gone viral. During lunch, Jack's phone buzzed. It was a message from his mom. "Jack, check out the school's social media page. You've made the news." Jack's eyes widened. News? He had only given a jar of coins to help his friends. What could possibly be newsworthy about that? But when Jack opened the school's social media page, he was stunned by what he saw. The post featured a photo of Jack holding the jar with a caption that read, "10-year-old Jack Carter pays off lunch debts with his own savings. A heartwarming act of kindness that changed lives." The post had already been shared hundreds of times, and comments were flooding in from all over the town, and even from people Jack didn't know. "Wow, this is incredible. one comment said. Such a selfless act. Jack is an inspiration. I'm donating $50 to help, another person wrote. We need more kids like Jack. Jack's heart swelled with pride as he scrolled through the comments. People were offering their support, pledging to help in any way they could. But what happened next blew Jack away. The school's post was shared by several local news stations, and soon, it wasn't just Maplewood who knew about Jack's generosity. News outlets from neighboring towns and even cities were picking up the story. Within hours, the story of the boy who saved his school's lunch program with nothing but his savings jar was spreading like wildfire. People from all over the country began sending in donations. Some sent $5, others $100, and still more sent, even larger amounts. The money poured in, and Jack's simple act of kindness began to snowball into something much bigger. What had started with a single jar of coins now had the power to make a lasting impact on countless children's lives. The school was overwhelmed by the outpouring of generosity. The lunch program coordinator, Ms. Baker, called Jack's mom to thank her personally. "This is incredible," she said. "Not only has Jack's donation paid off all of the lunch debts, but we now have enough money to set up a fund to help future students who are struggling to pay for their lunches." Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. The money wasn't just going to pay off the current lunch debts. It was going to create a lasting solution for years to come. Because of his selfless act, no child at Jack's school would ever have to go hungry again. As the donations continued to pour in, the school decided to hold a special event in Jack's honor. They organized a small assembly where Jack was invited to speak in front of his classmates, teachers, and parents. It was a bittersweet moment for Jack. He had never imagined his simple act of kindness would result in so much attention. But he knew that this was about more than just him. It was about the message of kindness and generosity he was trying to spread. On the day of the assembly, the gymnasium was filled with excitement. Jack stood at the front of the room, a little nervous, but proud. He took the microphone in his hands and began to speak. "Hi everyone," he started, his voice a little shaky. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped. I didn't do this for the attention or for the praise. I just wanted to make sure no one at our school had to go hungry. And because of all of you, that's going to happen. You all made this possible, and I'm really proud of what we've done together." The room erupted in applause, and Jack's heart swelled with emotion. He had no idea his simple decision to save up his allowance and pay off lunch debts would lead to such a big change. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the community coming together to support one another. After the assembly, Jack's story continued to spread. People from all over the country reached out to him, thanking him for his inspiration. Donations continued to flood in, and the school lunch program was secure for years to come. But what was even more powerful than the money was the ripple effect Jack had started. The act of kindness had touched the hearts of many, and Jack had shown everyone that even the smallest gesture could create a wave of change. As the school year ended, Jack walked home with his head held high. His jar was empty now, but his heart was full. He had made a difference, and that difference was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Jack realized that it wasn't about how much money he had saved or how many people knew his name. It was about the simple, powerful truth that one small act of kindness could change the world, and that was just the beginning. As the days passed, Jack's life began to take on a new shape. His story, once shared in the small town of Maplewood, had blossomed into something much bigger. People from all walks of life reached out to him. Some wanted to send their thanks, others offered more donations, and some simply wanted to learn about the boy who had inspired so many with nothing more than his kindness and determination. Jack was slowly becoming a symbol of selflessness, though he was still just a 10-year-old boy who had set out to help his friends. But it wasn't the attention that Jack was after. It wasn't the donations or the praise. For him, it was always about one thing: making sure that no child would ever have to sit in class hungry again. And in his eyes, that goal had already been achieved. However, little did Jack know, his decision to save his allowance for the lunch program was only the first step in a much bigger journey. The day after the assembly, the school district held a special meeting to discuss the impact of Jack's actions. District leaders and administrators gathered to talk about how they could continue Jack's mission of ensuring that all students had access to a meal. The conversation was lively, full of ideas about creating long-term solutions and addressing the needs of families who were still struggling. And at the center of the conversation was Jack's simple, yet powerful, act of kindness. It was during this meeting that something incredible happened. The school district announced that they were creating a special fund in Jack's name, the Jack Carter Fund for Student Lunches. The goal of the fund would be to ensure that no child in the district ever had to worry about going hungry at school. The money raised through this fund would be used to support children who were struggling to afford their meals and to create a sustainable, long-term solution for future students. Jack's eyes widened when he heard about the fund. He couldn't believe it. His small act of saving his allowance had inspired not just his school but the entire district to come together and create something lasting. The announcement made headlines across the region, and soon it became a model for other districts to follow. Jack's simple, heartfelt gesture had started a movement, one that was making a tangible difference for children who had no voice in their hunger. As time went on, the donations kept coming in, pouring in from both near and far. What Jack had started with a jar of coins had turned into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. The Jack Carter Fund for Student Lunches grew, providing meals for hundreds of children in need. Jack was invited to speak at other schools, sharing his story and inspiring other kids to take action in their own communities. Schools across the country began to adopt similar programs, all inspired by the courage and heart of one young boy. Despite all the attention, Jack remained humble. He didn't see himself as a hero. He just saw himself as a regular kid who wanted to make sure his friends had enough to eat. When asked about his newfound fame, Jack would always smile and say, "I just did what I thought was right. If more people did little things like this, the world would be a much better place." But Jack wasn't just helping others. He was also learning valuable lessons along the way. He realized that even the smallest actions could lead to great change. He learned that one person's effort, no matter how small it may seem, could ripple out and create a wave of kindness that touched the lives of others. And most importantly, he learned that no matter how young you are, you have the power to make a difference. One afternoon, as Jack was walking home from school, he found a letter waiting for him in his mailbox. It was a letter from a local charity organization that had been inspired by his story. The letter thanked Jack for his generosity and for reminding everyone that kindness is a gift that can never be taken for granted. The charity invited Jack to join them in their efforts to help children in need. They wanted him to be a part of a new initiative to provide food, clothing, and educational supplies to underprivileged children around the world. Jack's mother read the letter aloud, her voice filled with pride. Jack's eyes sparkled as he listened. "I can help more people?" he asked, his voice filled with excitement. His mother nodded. "You've already started something incredible, Jack. And now, you have the chance to do even more." As Jack thought about the opportunity, he felt a mix of emotions. He had always wanted to help others, but the idea of doing so on a global scale was overwhelming. But he wasn't afraid. He had seen what a small act of kindness could do, and he believed with all his heart that he could continue making a difference, no matter how far the journey took him. The next day, Jack stood before his classmates once more. This time it wasn't to share his story of saving coins or paying off lunch debts. This time Jack was announcing something even bigger, the launch of a community service project that would involve his entire school. Inspired by the work he had started with the Jack Carter Fund, Jack invited everyone to join him in a new initiative to give back to their community. Together they would collect food, clothes, and supplies for families who were struggling. "I've learned something important through all of this," Jack told his classmates. "It's not just about one big act of kindness. It's about all of us coming together and doing our part, no matter how small. If we all help, we can make a big difference." And so the movement continued. Jack's story, once just the tale of a boy with a jar of coins, had become a beacon of hope and inspiration for thousands. As the community came together to support one another, they proved that no matter how small the action, it can have a lasting impact on the world. In the end, Jack realized that the power of kindness wasn't just about helping others, it was about inspiring them to help as well. And he had done just that. His journey had started with a jar of coins, but it had led to a legacy of compassion, generosity, and community spirit that would continue to grow for years to come. The story of Jack Carter, the boy who saved his school, would never be forgotten.